My journey through the Holy Land is unlocking some amazing secrets I hadn't expected about St. George. To find out more of George's appeal to Muslims, I'm heading to the Muslim town of Al-Hada in the Bethlehem district of the West Bank, an hour south of Jerusalem. Here, Father Hannah had told me I would find a monastery and a church dedicated to the warrior saint. St. George's Monastery and Church for West Bank Christians is in the heart of a Muslim community. But because it's named after St. George, generations of Muslims have accepted and respected it. During the service, some of the congregation are worshipping with iron chains attached to the wall of the church. They wrap the chains around their bodies to evoke the power of St. George. Local legend says these are St. George's chains and they hold special healing powers. When the service is over, one man arrives who's come to pray to St. George alone. A year ago, Saliba Abu Awab nearly lost his life working at a nearby quarry. Saliba spotted a huge rock about to fall on a colleague. He dived to push his friend out of the way, but the rock landed on Saliba's back. His spinal cord was damaged in the accident and Saliba was left paraplegic. When possible, Saliba and his wife Samara come to pray to St. George for help.
When Saliba went into intensive care, he saw St. George in a dream, telling him to stand up. The next day, his condition improved. Since then, we believe St. George is helping us. We believe in St. George. God willing, he will do miracles for us.
And why did you put the chain around your husband?
A long time ago, people believed that chains could cure all sorts of illnesses. We hope St. George will cure Saliba. And we believe St. George can perform miracles. And God willing, he will.
I understand that for these Christians in the West Bank, St. George really is a powerful intercessor with God in heaven. Through him, they believe great miracles can be done. But what about George's connection to Muslims?
Hello.
Across the road from the church is the town's mosque.
Salam alaikum.
Salam alaikum. You're welcome.
And I've arranged to meet the mayor of Al-Hada. Maybe he can explain the Muslim link to St. George. And he begins by saying the town's name should be the starting point.
The town of Al-Khadr is not very old, not more than 400 years. It was named after the holy man Al-Khadr. He is mentioned in our Quran. He's a holy man. He was clever. He was as a saint.
So for you, Al-Hidra is St. George?
Yes, for Muslims, he is Al-Khadr.
Yeah.
For Christians, in English, is called Saint George.
St. George. Al-Hada, St. George, and they're all the same?
For one person, yeah. My father, he had a car accident here in that street. As he was sleeping at the hospital, he saw a white knight on a white horse. The holy person, he pulled the leg of my father very quickly and strongly. The thigh of my father came back in its right place.
Wow.
Yes, after that accident, my father lived 35 years. And that is a true story.
And is that what Al-Hidra does? He helps Muslims?
He helps Muslims and Christians, but we believe only with the help of our God.
St. George is the patron saint of England, and many people don't believe in him in the same way. What would you say to them about the importance of Al-Hidra, St. George?
I say to them, and they are free in their belief, but because he is mentioned in our Quran, we believe in him. All the holy persons who are mentioned in the Quran are very important for us.
What I've learnt is that George is more than a symbol. He's a living presence. And what's really amazed me is that he has profound meaning for both Muslim and Christian communities here in Palestine.
The Holy Land is revealing a completely different side to St. George than I'd grown up with in England. I knew George as an embarrassing symbol of warfare and racism, but in the Middle East, St. George is a protector and healer. He has several personas, and through them is an unlikely unifying figure for Christians, Muslims, and also Jews. Al-Hidra appears in the Quran as a mysterious servant of God with special powers. He's immortal, and according to folklore, he appears on earth riding a white horse. Like George, Al-Hidra is a spiritual protector and healer, which is why the two have become so intertwined. So if George is so real and believed here, surely he must have existed. Before I leave the Holy Land, I head back into Jerusalem to the Hebrew University.
It's becoming increasingly clear that George is a big figure out here. But what I want to know is there any hard historical evidence to back up his life story?
The earliest manuscript with the life of St. George is a Greek manuscript of the 5th century. He is described as a Cappadocian soldier who has commanded Roman troops.
So if there's evidence of him being a soldier, does that demonstrate that he existed?
No, the fact that he is described as a soldier may point to the fact that there is some historical figure behind George, but he may have been some other martyr whose story was attached to the story of George.
It seems to me that you're giving me very little historically to ground a belief in St. George. Is there anything, any history, any truth to the story?
It's difficult to say because, you see, this is how it goes with martyrs, with the early martyrs. We usually do not have historical data.
George is still very popular today. Why do you feel that is?
Because of its identification with all kinds of values. For instance, in the case of England, it symbolized something. Even James Bond was popular, though he was not an historical person. It symbolized something at the time of the Cold War, something that people valued. So this is the reason, I think.
Whether St. George was a real living person or not, the strength of what he symbolizes, protection on the battlefield or miracle working and healing, meant his following was destined to grow in strength. And George's appeal spread throughout the globe. Today, George has special significance for people as distant from each other as Russia, Portugal, and Ethiopia.